This is CityCast Seattle. I'm Jane C. Hu, and here's what Seattle's talking about. Seattle Public Schools is introducing a new reading curriculum. We'll explain what that entails, including the role iPads play, and we'll dig into what Seattle Public Schools Superintendent Ben Scholdinger has done in his first 100 days in office. But first, what's your plan for the big one? Or even just the next big windstorm or flood that blows through town? A good place to start might be organizing your neighbors. And for the last 17 years, Seattle's emergency hubs have been doing just that. Here to discuss is Cindy Barker, one of the original founders of Seattle Emergency Hub Network. Welcome to the show, Cindy.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So, Cindy, how did the Emergency Hub Network get started?
Nisqually was the starting point. We had the Nisqually earthquake back in 2001, and everybody got excited about being prepared for disasters, but not much happened. And so people were making plans, but nothing coalesced. Then we had a windstorm out here in West Seattle. We did not have power for 2 weeks in some areas.
Oof.
And so what we observed is that people were gathering in natural areas, like in front of the markets, in street corners that had high traffic possibilities. And they were talking about, where can I go? What coffee shop is open? I haven't had a hot shower in 3 days. What should I do? So neighbors were exchanging that sort of information about getting through this disaster. So in West Seattle, we started going, then that's what we should do. We had a lot of community groups, and we should just ask the community groups to find a place in their neighborhood where they could set up and help people connect and share information. And so it was a citizen-led group. The Office of Emergency Management also knew that there was different things going on in different neighborhoods. So they connected us with Wallingford and Queen Anne Magnolia, who were doing different things. One was looking at vulnerable seniors, and the other was writing a plan. And in West Seattle, we kind of went, oh, we should write a plan. That's really a great idea. So that's how we got together and formed the network. And then that's all we do is we say we have a model for how to put together a way for you to stand up with your neighbors and help your community. Please join and set up a location.
So how many hubs are there currently?
There's actually 142 hubs.
Oh, wow.
71 of them have active teams. And 61 of them are kind of designated places. The city came in later and said the P-Patch locations would make really good gathering spots because they're community-based. We've looked at some of those, and they're under power lines, and so we've taken some off the map. But right now, there's about 172 across the city.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I think they're generally speaking fairly flat, open spots that people could gather theoretically.
Generally, parking lots, church parking lots. And we do look for, let's not have a hub in a liquefaction zone,
Yeah.
Do
no
some
need
safety thinking.
Yeah, no need to gather there. So you mentioned that this gives kind of a blueprint for how people can get together and how to organize. So maybe giving your particular hub, your home hub as an example, what is your plan with your neighbors if a disaster strikes?
There's two levels. My home hub is actually Morgan Junction. We have a park. It's flat. There's no overhead lines. We have a small cache of equipment that is communications oriented. Whiteboards, tent canopies, ways to put up posters that say, there's no toilet system working. Here's how to build a twin bucket system. So we set that up and then let people know, if you're okay and your family is okay, check on your neighbors, see what you can do in your own local area first, then come to the hub, and hopefully you can come help other people. And what we do is we actually match people up with those things, and that the connection happens outside the hub. So we don't have people bring food, supplies, or anything to the hub.
Okay, so it's just a information gathering point. So I actually watched a video that the hub put out, and I thought one good example is like, say someone has a broken window and they need a tarp to cover that broken window, someone else comes to the hub and is like, oh, I have a tarp. And then they can get in touch with that person and they can exchange whatever it is that they need. So how many times have the hubs been activated?
There hasn't. And part of the problem is, not problem, but good thing is, the city has done a lot more to prepare. So where our windstorm here in West Seattle was because of a lot of trees that came down, and especially during ice storms, you have a lot of that damage. The city has done a whole lot of mitigation to prevent that from happening. So the recent example we had of the windstorm that took out all the power on the east side, in Seattle, we lost power for maybe 2 days at the most. So it's the difference between an emergency. Emergency means the city has got extra crews and they're working to bring it up and you're pretty confident it's going to get restored soon. A disaster is when everybody is overwhelmed. And so the disaster was on the east side. So I talked to some of our people that we know on the east side who do similar stuff. And they were like, yep, we were out of power for 2 weeks. We would have definitely been, running, getting out chainsaws, helping people get out of their driveways. The 2 times that we've actually locally you can consider activating was when the Greenwood gas explosion happened. The hub captain was like, should I go out? And we were talking by phone and she went down to go check with what was going on at the scene. The Chamber of Commerce had actually already set up what was basically a hub. So they just plugged right in. And the other time hubs almost get involved or can be of assistance is sometimes we have school incidents and you have parents flooding to a school. We had one up at Pathfinder where the hub captain was ready to stand out there and say, hey, you can't go in. We know it's a reunification process that's going to start. And they can hand out water to the parents that are sitting there waiting. So each hub has autonomy to do what's right for their neighborhood. We don't have this one thing all must do. But the general sense, hubs are not going to set up unless all the power's down, major disaster, and it's going to be more than a couple of hours,
Right. Yeah. And I know part of the idea behind these hubs is that if there is a major disaster and emergency services is otherwise going to be occupied trying to respond to more immediate danger, that this is a way for people to gather and share resources. So I am curious also, you mentioned that, there are over 100 of these hubs, but about 70 of them there's actually a team that's assembled around them. I was looking at the map at my neighborhood and noticed that there is nobody organizing. And I'm realizing that maybe I need to be the person who does that. So what advice do you have for people who see that need and want to fill it?
Contact us for sure. We currently have about 8 new hubs in the startup phase. And it takes about a year to get a full up hub because when you think about it, my community is 7,000 people, right? And so we want to make sure people can engage in that process. So we do a lot of outreach. We do a lot of training, but we kind of go through these steps of get your gear. How will you be ready to help people? We started actually with backpacks in people's homes. We kind of went, well, that doesn't make sense. If Cindy's on vacation, how do we get the gear down to the hub?
Right.
So, that's why the small cache of supplies. And so we walk people through how to get that, how to do outreach, how to engage your community because hubs and preparedness are at its basic neighborhood engagement and community building, right? So if
knowing your neighbors
ahead of the disaster. Know the neighbors around you. Who is the senior who can't get out of... Remember what COVID was like?
Yes.
We all wanted to help people who were afraid to go to the grocery store, who couldn't, who were dealing with children. So that community building is really, really an important thing. And so we just do it at kind of a larger scale.
It seems like all a good dress rehearsal for just making sure that those community bonds are in place before anything big happens. But on an individual level, what should people do to get prepared? And what tips do you maybe have for families to share with, say, kids about how to handle an emergency?
The first thing I'll say is we live in what's called no-notice country. If you live in Florida, you know a hurricane's coming. Here, it could happen 10 minutes from now, earthquake in particular. We know that people mostly will be wherever they are when the disaster happens, so it's kind of a shelter in place.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to evacuate 800,000 people after the earthquake. It's not physically possible. So that means living with what you have. The stores won't be open. The supply chains will be broken. So put away water, because you can't live more than 3 days without water. Food, that's about a 3-week limit. People get very cranky after a couple of days, but you can make it. We know people have medications. We have a lot of really critical medications for people now. Make sure you have a stash of those. And there's a whole series of, how do you do that? Think about your pets. Have a plan for your children, for your senior on the other end, the vulnerable senior. And if you're on any kind of life essential medical equipment, make sure you have power backup.
That's smart. I was thinking, my partner and I were like, where should we meet if we're not both in the house when something happens? And I mean, maybe one of the emergency hub locations would be a good meeting spot for people to gather.
It's a good spot. And I'll use an example. If one of you is on the other side of the Ship Canal Bridge and it's down, then you're going to be where you're at. So you might as well plug into the hub, because you can do nothing but help. Why don't you help people instead of worry about it?
Well, Cindy Barker, thank you so much for joining us today. If people want to learn more about emergency hubs, where should they go?
SeattleEmergencyHubs.org. On our website, we have the video that you talked about. We have the map where you can go and look for the nearest hub near you or the gap near you. And you can click on any of our active hubs to find out who the hub captain is and how to contact them.
Thanks so much for joining us, Cindy.
Thank you.
And when we come back, we're talking about what the new Seattle Public School superintendent has accomplished in his first few months on the job. If you're in Washington and you haven't tried King Harvest hummus yet, you're missing out on a locally made favorite. Since 1977, King Harvest Hummus has been making their small batch, fresh hummus in Portland, Oregon. It's not like an average hummus. It's a thicker texture combined with bold flavors, and it creates raving fans after tasting it. Not surprising, since it's made local and fresh on the shelf. Some of our favorite flavors are roasted red pepper, jalapeno, sun-dried tomato, and of course, the classic. You can eat this healthy dip with chips, veggies, or add it to a sandwich or wrap. Or maybe you just want to eat it with a spoon. Most people buy more than one because once it's open, this healthy dip disappears fast. You've got to try it to love it. Don't miss out on expanding your snack experience with this locally made fresh dip. King Harvest Hummus. Simple, better, one dip at a time. You can find King Harvest in the refrigerated section at your local grocery store. Not one, but two members of the CityCast Seattle team have gone to Italy recently. But what if I told you you don't have to go all that way to get those vibes? You can stroll olive groves at the Durant Olive Mill, the northernmost olive mill in the US, nestled in the hills of Dundee. Just 30 miles outside of Portland, Dundee is a much shorter trip than flying all the way to Europe. And the mill is on Red Ridge Farms, where you can walk along paths lined with hazelnuts and lavender, buzzing with local bees. Taste award-winning olive oils that regularly bring home gold, and expect flavors that are bold, punchy, and seriously memorable. While you're at it, taste the Dundee Hills Pinot from one of the 40-plus nearby wineries. Visit traveldundee.com/citycast to unlock exclusive lodging deals for your stay in the Willamette Valley. Seattle Public School Superintendent Ben Schuldiner just hit his first 100 days on the job, and a piece in the Seattle Times took a look at how he's doing so far. The author of that piece is Seattle Times education reporter Claire Bryan. Welcome to the show, Claire.
Thanks for having me.
Also joining us is Brett Hamill, writer, performer, and the cartoonist behind the weekly series Doom Loop. Welcome, Brett.
I'm looking forward to learning all the things I should already know as a public school parent.
So, Claire, you wrote in your most recent piece here, from the moment he was announced as the new superintendent, Schuldiner pledged to make Seattle the country's single greatest urban school district. What does it mean to be the greatest urban school district?
That's a good question. I think he's laid out quite a few measurable goals in terms of math and reading. He's really focused on, I think, 8th grade math and 3rd grade reading. There's lots of different ways to measure a school district, and it's not just academics, but those are two kind of areas that he's identified as really important academic benchmarks. But I think that's just one piece of it. He wants the test scores to be good across the board, something he's been very candid about, which I think everyone in SPS had a hunch and had a sense about, but he's been very clear that SPS actually does have really good academic scores when it comes to mostly white students and Asian students. And then when you look at basically every other demographic of students, they have this graph actually that he's presented. And he has this sort of famous quote at this point where he says, you could drive a truck through it because it's, a couple of lines of the students are up here and then there's all this white space and then it's all the rest of the students. So anyway, that is to say, one of his big goals is to make sure we're the best urban school district, but for all students, not just for certain groups.
So what led to a new superintendent coming in, and kind of what did he promise in the beginning that he's actually delivered on so far?
Yeah, so SPS has had a lot of turnover when it comes to superintendents. It predates my time at the Seattle Times, but I think every maybe 3 years there's a new superintendent. I don't know, Brett, you might know. I don't know how old your kids are or how long they've been in the district.
It feels like they turn over relatively quickly.
Yeah, it's been kind of a problem because it's hard to, it's always good to have more continuity, especially for teachers and principals at the school building level. It's really important to have continuity. And I believe that is true, obviously, for superintendents too. So there's been a long history of short tenure for superintendents. Basically, Brent Jones was the old superintendent, and he said that he was moving to California for his wife's job. Brent Jones did not move to California. He just got appointed the interim dean of one of the Seattle colleges.
Yes, he's now the interim president of Seattle Central College.
Yes. So I'm not actually sure what happened there.
It's a very Seattle way to leave a job. Oh, I got to go do this thing.
My
we'll
wife's
stay in touch,
job
though.
in California. Yes. Interesting. Okay, so then Ben Schuldiner comes in, and what has he what did he promise before coming in, and what has he done in these first few months?
Yeah, he's been pretty clear from the get-go that he's going to be really blunt and really kind of ambitious with the goals for the district. And I think he has been very blunt and honest, at least to a degree that I think Seattle parents and Seattle community aren't used to. One of his most tangible things was visiting all 106 schools in his first 100 days, which he did do. I went with him on some of those visits, and he did, I think his first day, he did 7 visits all in one day. And then other days he was doing 2 or 3 or 4 or something. He visited all the schools, and he would kind of quickly, because, a school visit would be like an hour, but he would talk to the principal. He would ask, how can the district help? He would look into pretty much every classroom. Even we would walk by a random door and he would pop his head in and be like, what is this room? What's going on in here? Even if it was just like a closet. So I think he was really trying to get a sense of seeing and catching everything in little details of like, oh, this fence is broken or this lock is broken. It's cool that he got to see every school. He got to meet every principal, talk to them. And you can tell he's an educator when you're in the classroom with him, because he is just like, he is on the ground, on the carpet with the kids, talking to them, reading with them. You can tell that he seems to have an eye for what is good instruction and what is not. And I think it's given him a good foundation of what does it actually look like on the ground.
It's always nice to see a superintendent, someone in management and education who clearly has a background in classroom education. Like, I feel like often with the way that our current system is set up, sometimes you have people being promoted into these roles who really didn't spend a ton of time in classrooms. And so I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. And I mean, not that I know him so well, but it seems like he really enjoys it. Like, you could just see there's a lot of joy. It seems like he really enjoys being around kids and being in that space.
And that's nice too.
Yeah.
So I know that another big change that just took place in Seattle Public Schools is their new cell phone policy. I'm curious if you have any insight on how that is going so far for families
Yeah.
and teachers.
Yeah, so it was somewhat noteworthy and somewhat not, depending on who you talk to. I think a lot of people were impressed that he made a decision and didn't wait to the fall to implement it. I think it was like the first Monday in May. It was like, nope, this is happening. And I think the hope is that it's helpful to have a uniform decision across the district, because basically every school, it was kind of up to them to decide what to do, how strict to do it. And so this should help. The policy is that all elementary and middle schools will have cell phones, can't be in the school or used in the school at all by students. So away for the complete day. And then for high school, they can have their cell phone during passing periods, but not during class. So during passing periods or lunch. The superintendent has said that this might be a starting point and they could build out. But I think the critique is that, especially for the high school level, that still puts a lot of the burden on the teacher to be policing, like, okay, passing period is over now, you need to put your phone away. So yeah, I think some people think, well, it will help teachers in that they can at least point to this district policy and say, hey, this is official, this isn't hodgepodge. But I think others feel like it still puts a lot of burden on the teachers to be just handling all of those cell phones.
Brett, I'm curious as a parent if you have areas of interest for what you would like to see the superintendent tackle, or things that you're curious about with this new superintendent in place.
First off, the cell phone policy, big thumbs up from this parent. There's too many devices in general. So probably that would be one of my main concerns. And Claire will probably know a lot more about this, but there's been a decline in reading skills that seems to me to be tethered to the use of screens constantly.
Oh, we're going to get into that in just a sec.
Okay, good. Because that's one of the areas where it's like, don't bring home a laptop, bring home a book, bring home a workbook. I'm kind of an anti-homework guy anyways. So like that, I just feel like it has limited utility. And then, let's layer onto that the use of AI and different, spicy autocomplete. That's probably my main concerns right now.
To the screens point, I know that a lot of parents share that concern. I'm working on a story about parents who have had success having their kid not use a laptop or a tablet in schools. It is really tricky because so much curriculum has a digital component or is completely digital. Specifically, it's the testing. A lot of standardized testing and the tests via the curriculum are all on a laptop. So even if a teacher does a lot of printouts or has a workbook or a textbook, they ultimately often say, well, when it comes to the test day, they do need a laptop. And so I think it's something that the superintendent is also aware of. He said that he saw some good use of technology and instruction. There are some pros when it comes to the device can sometimes help teachers better differentiate the learning to the specific kid pretty quickly. It can give more real-time feedback, better data tracking and that stuff. But the cons are that there's a device in the room and it's distracting. And I think what the superintendent saw was there was pockets of time that were kind of free time or time where a student finished their work early. They were advanced enough that they got to move on to more challenging material, but that more challenging material was delivered via the laptop because the teacher was busy. And so I think he does have his eye on like that time is kind of a slippery slope, and that can turn into a lot of free time where they're just on a device. And let's not do that. Let's make sure if they're on a device, they're going to have a very specific purpose for that and it's instructional. And anyway, he hasn't come out with any sort of decision about that, but I do think that's something that he's aware of or looking at right now.
I'm going to assume the superintendent is listening to this. And so I will tell you right here and now, your kids are going to figure out how to play video games on that device. They absolutely will. Kids are like these hackers. They're willing to experiment with different
I had
gateways
games
and
on my
stuff.
graphing calculator when I was a kid. So yes.
When you know the little dinosaur like connection timed out screen that you get, my kid taught me that that's actually a video game you can play. So, you know, when you get the little dinosaur screen, you can like jump over things with it. So they will sit there and occupy themselves with these completely inane games the second they're done with their stuff. So
nature finds a way, as
yes,
Dr. Malcolm said. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about another important perennial topic in education, reading. One goal of a quality education is to create a society in which people can reason and meaningfully engage with ideas. And a key part of that is something that I think a lot of us take for granted: learning how to read. I have no conscious memory of learning how to read. Do either of you have any memories about learning to read?
When I was little, I read a book to my mom and she said, "How do you know what the words say in here? Did your brother read this to you?" Because she had never read me the book. And I was like, I don't know.
I just know now.
I spontaneously learned how to read. There's no explanation for it, but that's how it went down.
I have a memory of sitting with a book with my mom called like The Learning of Phonics or something. But the memory is about more sitting with my mom. It's not really about trying to decode words or that sensation of really it clicking for reading.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the advice that is given to, especially parents of really young kids, is that reading, sure, great. We want eventually for kids to learn how to read, but the act of reading together is also about spending time together and having that time where you can have shared attention on something. So, Claire, I know you recently reported that Seattle Public Schools just adopted a new reading curriculum for K-5 students that uses the science of reading method. So can you tell us a little bit about what this curriculum does and what this method is, and if it's changed at all, I guess, over the time since a lot of us were last in school?
Yeah, so the science of reading at this point is, I feel like SPS adopting this curriculum, it's almost late to the science of reading bandwagon, but it's great. I mean, the science of reading basically is probably how most of us learned how to read. It's phonics, it's sounding out words, it's clapping out syllables. And I'm by no means an expert on the science of reading, but from what I understand, it's a lot more direct instruction and sounding out words. And so this curriculum that Seattle adopted is rooted in that. And the curriculum that the district was using before actually wasn't, but that doesn't mean that there were individual teachers who were kind of bringing in those methods themselves. Sure. This is just kind of like the district cell phone policy. This is just now going to be a more uniform approach for all K-5 students.
Brett, have you heard of this?
Every level of instruction I've experienced is so much more sensible than the way I was taught as a kid. And it's shocking. Like the tricks and tips, for example, in math, they're taught like all different ways to solve a problem. We were taught one way to solve a problem. Figure it out, dummy. And the same with reading. So great job, educators, on figuring out. I guess it can be easier than we experienced.
Yeah, right.
Wait, Brett, sorry, I have to ask, how old is your student, if you don't mind sharing?
He's in fourth grade.
Okay.
So his teacher was a former reading resources teacher. So we're getting the cream of the crop in terms of like reading instruction and all the most, newest methods. So yeah, it's impressive.
So we touched on this a little bit previously, but Claire, you mentioned in your reporting that this curriculum includes 20-minute instructional blocks that take place on a tablet or an iPad. So I know some parents have raised concerns about this. You just brought us some of the arguments for using them. For instance, maybe you could get a new lesson if you're kind of moving ahead. What are the main reasons for using them in classrooms?
So it helps differentiate the learning between students. So if students are ahead or behind, they can get more hyper adapted homework problems basically for themselves. They can get real-time feedback on how they're doing. So if the teacher doesn't have time to walk over to the student and help and give feedback, the tablet maybe can. It tests all the students and it can kind of crunch that data on where are the kids, how well are they doing, how are they not. I think my understanding is that that makes it easier for teachers to know this is where they're at, and actually we should spend some more time on this topic, or we can move on, that sort of thing. And the hope is that it's only 20 minutes and not even necessarily 20 minutes for every single lesson, but that time is when a student could work on getting a little bit farther along instead of just maybe, I don't know, sitting there and chatting with a friend. I don't know what you did when you were,
I think I sat there. I would do a little art project. Maybe I would chat with my friends. I'd probably be writing my friend a note. I'd be finding some way to play a game on my graphing calculator. I'd be up to just nothing good. But in a way, I kind of feel like that is part of the school experience though, right? You can't be fully engaged in learning for 7 or 8 hours a day. Your brain can't do that. You need to take those little breaks too.
Yeah. And I think it's just really interesting. I've thought about this concept of play a lot, where I was talking to a parent who was saying, oh, my kid, got in trouble for flying a paper airplane across the room.
Classic. I'm glad they're still doing that.
Well, right. He's getting in trouble, but their kids who are just on their laptops are not getting in trouble. But they're also goofing off. They're just doing it in a quiet way that isn't able to be perceived by the classroom setting. And so I just think it's interesting, they're still playing, but they're playing in this insular way that is maybe more peaceful for the teacher or more quiet.
Yes.
But it just looks very different.
Less visible to the adults in the room. But yeah, I had heard a few years ago that students who were on their laptops for class, would get into a group Google Doc and just be chatting with their friends on there, which I was oh my God, Of course they're doing that. That's absolutely what I would have been doing if Google Docs had existed when I was in school.
It's one giant group chat, but it's just different colored fonts.
Which I love that for them.
The big scandal in my son's class recently was that someone in the class had figured out how to hack into other kids' Freckle accounts. Freckle is
what is
app.
Freckle?
Yeah.
This is one of the apps they're using, one of the learning apps. So someone had figured out how to hack other people's accounts and took their gold stars or whatever, and no one was sure who it was. There's always going to be shenanigans with kids, and they do need some enforced boredom and quiet time too. That letting your mind wander and having to face your own consciousness, I think, is just as crucial in education as book learning is.
I mean, I need someone to enforce that for me. So I imagine if you're, younger and you're still learning how to do that, living in a world in which it's really easy to just be occupied all the time by a device, it could be hard to draw those boundaries. And okay, speaking of tech, has SPS considered how it's going to integrate AI into education? For reading, I imagine, I could see some ability to, for instance, dole out new lessons or to quickly crunch numbers on, where students are at. But is there much discussion about that right now?
I do know that teachers, are using it to lesson prep or, to one thing I think, especially when you have students who are at different skill levels, I think AI can help you write a problem that's a little bit less hard or a little bit more hard, or their student speaks a different language that they don't speak. And so I think they are using it. When it comes to the actual apps that the students are using in the curriculum, I know that they might have access to an app that's sort of an educational game, and they're playing that game. There's probably apps that include AI, or there's tutoring features of an app or of a curriculum that's getting them help on a problem. And my understanding is it's kind of the wild, wild west of how teachers pick these different apps or different products that are going to have a component of them that is going to use AI.
Yeah, I imagine that at least in public schools, when these devices are maybe being given to students in classrooms, you can control a little bit more what's on them and what your access is like. I mean, talking to friends who are working in like colleges and universities right now, it really feels like it is difficult to control what students are doing and what they're accessing to, write papers or take tests and all of that. But I imagine it's a little easier to control with K through 12 students. Brett, as a parent, do you have thoughts on AI?
Kill it with fire would be the first thing that comes to mind. But, no, we joke around, and my kid, I want him to, of course, develop his own opinions about these things, but there's going to be a certain level of household indoctrination. So I, talk about the problems with AI, and I've given him a bunch of examples where generative AI has said some things that were completely false and often dangerous. And of course, we've seen the stories of where AI actively abetted someone in committing suicide, for example. So it's scary. And also a lot of kids, that's AI is another way of saying that's a lie or that's cap. There is some sensitivity towards visual AI as well. Like when we made my kid's birthday, we went to one of those websites where you make like a birthday invite, and he wanted to look at it to make sure it wasn't AI first, which I was like, way to go, buddy. Because he said, I was like, why do you care? And he's like, it's just fake. I don't want AI. All my friends can spot AI immediately. So there is definitely a bias forming.
The kids are all right.
The generational revolt, yes.
I think the district could probably do what might be coming down the pipeline is a better job of making sure that what students are using is more uniform, making sure it doesn't include AI, or if it does, it's an appropriate use of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is going to be a long road to figure out as a society, let alone in SPS. That's all for today here at CityCast Seattle. Claire Bryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
And Brett Hamill, thanks as always for being here.
Pleasure as always.
I'm your host, Jane C. Hu, and listeners, we love hearing from you all. So if you've got thoughts on AI use in classrooms, send us an email at seattle@citycast.fm. You can also text us or leave us a voicemail at 206-880-3931. Until next time, see you, Seattle. If you're enjoying the podcast, be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen so you never miss an episode. Also, leave us a little review. It's really helpful. And tell your friends about us. You can also get more local news and events delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter. Just go to seattle.citycast.fm. And you can find us on Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok at CityCast Seattle, and you can watch full episodes of this show on YouTube.